So open world farming in Legion Remix is actually pretty strong, especially if you find really good mob grinding locations, and I have found one that may be the best one currently possible. And this is a small location located in Suramar called the Crimson Thicket, which is just this small little area with a few broken down towers that has a ton of enemies in a small area. Really high density of enemies. They're usually grouped up or somewhat grouped up, so they're really easy to group together. There are also a handful of elites in this area, which we'll go over why that's incredibly strong in this video as well. And essentially, once you get here, you're just going to AoE mob grind this location. Now this is in Suramar, and there are some casters within this, which if you don't know, in Legion Remix, a lot of the casters are ridiculously strong in terms of how much damage they actually do. So you have to be careful with that. And it seems that Suramar enemies are generally scaled higher than a lot of other enemies in the other zones. So you're going to need to be somewhat geared and somewhat progressed to do this, at least as a solo, and at least to group up a lot of these enemies at once. But if you want to come here with a group or a couple other players, or if you just want to group up less of the enemies at a time, you shouldn't have too much of an issue doing that. Now, like all of the other open world farms in Legion Remix, you're going to be farming this in Heroic World Tier. Once you turn on Heroic World Tier, any enemy you go against in the open world can be empowered or have the different affixes on them, which will just give them a bunch of additional loot. It makes them more difficult, but it gives them a ton of more bronze, gives them a ton of infinite power drops, and it even gives them the chance to drop some other items which are going to be very strong in this farm as well. And all of the footage you're watching is when I only had 15 infinite knowledge. If you don't know why infinite knowledge is so important in Legion Remix, watch my previous video. And while 15 infinite knowledge is decent right now, you can get 26 infinite knowledge in this first phase of Legion Remix, which means you get close to double the infinite power I'm actually gaining in this footage. And you'll notice some of the time I loot these groups of enemies, I'll just get like 5,000 infinite power. And when you're somewhat geared, you can kill these groups of enemies pretty quickly outside of the elites, which brings me to why the elites here are actually pretty strong. And that's mainly because these elites, even if they're not empowered, still kind of function as an empowered enemy. They always seem to drop bronze and infinite power like they are an empowered enemy, but the small amount of elites that can spawn in this area can also drop fragmented memento of APOC challenges, which if you don't know what this item is, you get them from like dungeons more commonly and raids, and you can get them from elites, and you can buy in 100 of these to get a ridiculous amount of infinite power and stamina. And at 15 ranks of infinite knowledge, when you use 100 of these, you get 87,500 infinite power. And while this isn't the main reason you're doing this farm, just being able to consistently pick up a small amount of these epoch challenge tokens is just going to build up to a ton of additional stamina and infinite power. Now, open world farming in the Heroic World Tier is incredibly strong for farming threads, which gives you stamina and infinite power. But another reason it's so strong is from gearing, because killing any of the empowered or affixed enemies in the open world has a chance to give you a mote of broken time, which are incredibly important for the entirety of gearing in Legion Remix. You can get these from raids, from dungeons, from quests, and again, also from defeating empowered enemies. And you combine 10 of these to create a raid item from any available Legion Remix raid. And how that works in Legion Remix is essentially you just get a piece of gear that is an item level upgrade to what you're wearing, or that's what it'll be a majority of the time. This is absolutely the best way to actually continue to increase your item level, because anytime you get 10 of these and make an item, it will just be an item level upgrade. And like I mentioned, you can farm these in the open world, and this spot is incredibly strong for that as well. This is going to be a bit more of a side thing, because running around and doing, say, world quests, or just doing any quests you haven't done, or even spam running like normal dungeons can be better when you're specifically talking about just motes of broken time. But doing an open world farm like this gives you a lot of bronze and a lot more infinite power and stamina than you could get in those other methods. So it is a bit of a give and take, but this location is absolutely ridiculous when it comes to just getting all of those things we've just went over. Now, a few things about this area, a couple I've gone over, but first off, this doesn't seem to have hyper spawning. The spawns are just ridiculously fast. You'll see just in this small area, as I'm doing like 2 or 3 different pulls to group up all these enemies, the enemies at like the first area, which is super close to where you still are anytime you're killing enemies, will generally be respawning when you're done with everything else. And I'm decently geared. I'm like 611 item level with a decent infinite power and a really strong build for actually doing this. So unless you're crazy high geared, you probably won't be able to outfarm the spawns of these enemies. And if you do, it'll probably only be for a few seconds. So you really shouldn't have an issue always having enemies to group up and defeat here. Like mentioned before, some of these are casters, and for whatever reason, casters just casting spells on you do ridiculous damage. So try to focus on those first and lock those down. Like I mentioned, there are also a handful of elites around here. The elites don't seem to be particularly dangerous, but again, they always seem to work as an empowered enemy, and they can give you those fragmented mementos of epoch challenges, which is just really good to build up for an ungodly amount of additional infinite power. And the really main reason why this spot is just so good is because it's just so high density of enemies in a small area, and it seems that it's a really high chance for a lot of these enemies to be empowered. I don't know if that's because it's also considered like an elite area because there are elites here, or maybe because it's in Suramar and maybe considered more of an endgame zone, but this spot is just absolutely ridiculous. You'll see in all the footage that I'm just grouping up these enemies, looting them, and you get thousands of infinite power every loot. And that's on top of getting everything else we went over. So this is absolutely the best open world farm I have seen so far. But that's all I want to go over. So thanks for watching.
Mercy for outlanders. Scum like you should obey your betters. Aras, Thalas! Torthuras, Fala. The Shaldorai will